Aloha, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staying Young at Heart. My name is Maria Mera, and I'm your host, and I'm also a financial advisor with Edward Jones. Today, we are going to talk about the health and the benefits of being multilingual. And for that, I brought my very good friend and professor of applied linguistics in the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Marta, welcome, aloha, yokoso, bienvenue, bienvenida. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I told the title, the short version of the title that you have at the University of Hawaii. Please enlighten us and tell us what your the real title is.
I am a professor of Spanish applied linguistics, and I work at the Spanish program, and I also work at the second language studies department.
So, okay, so let's take one piece at a time, because I know you're probably one of the hardest working people I know, and you've been doing this for a few years. So let's talk first about really the benefits of being multilingual before we go into your work. Go ahead.
This program is called Being Young at Heart. I think what bilingualism does is it keeps you young in your brain. So from a young age, you can actually become bilingual, and actually the best age to become bilingual, but it's not the only time that someone can become bilingual or multilingual. The majority of the world is actually multilingual, although in most places in the United States, it's a little difficult to see, but that is quite clear here in Hawaii. A lot of people speak more than one language. When we are young, of course, it helps us with other cognitive functions, like we learn math when we are bilingual in a little bit easier. And what's super interesting is that all the research that is coming now about the benefits of being bilingual for actually the decline of cognitive competences when we get older. So now there's quite a bit of research proving that for people that are bilingual, there is a delay on the onset symptoms of, for example, dementia or Alzheimer's. So having a bilingual brain actually helps you staying a little bit cognitive competent for a little bit longer.
That is really meaningful, and that says a lot. You said something. So when we learn a language, can we compare it to like learning mathematics or learning another something else, or is it different for us who are both Spanish to learn English? Is it the same as learning science, or is it a completely different thing for our brain?
Well, the part of our brain that learns languages is connected through other types of learning. So what it happens is that when you're able to activate several parts of your brain, right, that also helps learning other things. And, it doesn't have to be just math. It can be anything, any type of knowledge. But so math is highly connected with learning a language.
What about like learning a third language or a fourth language? Is it like compounded interest? And this is just my financial vocabulary, but is it better the more languages you learn, or it doesn't really work that way?
Well, there's different theories depending on how you believe that we learn the languages, but usually what it gets, it gets easier in a way, right? So once you learn a language, not only you learn the vocabulary and the syntax of that language, but you also learn the communicative strategies. And those are very common to all languages. So you learn how to listen, you learn how to infer from the context, and those things apply to any new language that you learn. So in a short answer, yes. Once you know two languages, it's a little bit easier to learn a third one, a little bit easier to learn a fourth one, etc. And especially if those languages are connected in the root, right? If they're Roman languages or Indo-European languages.
What about again? For I'm talking from a Spanish point of view, and I can help that. But what about if is it different for me to obviously if I learn French is easier than if I learn English, but English would be easier than if I learn Mandarin, or is there a difference also, or?
Yes, if the language, the structure of the language is one of the things that are get learned first, let's say. So if your language has the same structure as the language that you're learning, it is easier to have what we call positive transfer. So things that you do in your first language transfer very well to the second language. If the language has a totally different alphabet, or if it is iconic, so like Chinese, Japanese, etc., then of course it gets a lot more difficult to learn it. Not impossible at all, but a little bit more difficult.
What about age? Like it seems that if you don't learn before you're 12, or it gets harder and harder. What does it have to do? Age have to do there?
Well, there's something in language acquisition which is called the critical period, and that means that after a certain age, our brain is not as malleable. And there's different theories on when that critical period happens. And the most accepted now is that that critical period is different for different parts of the language. So, for example, a baby is able to recognize and produce any amount of sounds, all the sounds of all the languages in the world. But as the kid gets exposed to just one or two or three languages, the brain of the kid will lose the capacity of produce and recognize those other sounds, right? And then it kind of happens the same with lexical, with the vocabulary, the structure, etc. But the critical period, it's a little bit, it is true, it happens, and neuroscience can help us see how these things happen in the brain. But anybody can learn a second language. It's just that the expectations of how you will learn that language have to be a little bit different.
Can you confuse a kid? Like right here we have so many, and I'm just thinking of my previous guest in the other program, and mother Japanese, Korean, father Spanish, learning English in Hawaii. So can you confuse a kid just by teaching so many languages at the same time, or the brain welcomes as many languages?
Yeah, kids are sponges. So no, you're not going to confuse a kid. What it happens is sometimes the parents get a little scared because the kid may take a little bit longer to start maybe speaking, or may decide to just use one language or the other language. But that's all part of the process of a multilingual kid. So a kid theoretically can learn an indefinite number of languages with enough exposition to it. So, that's why we don't have enough, right? We don't have enough exposure to time in contact with thousands of languages. But yeah, no, that kid will not be confused. It'll come to a time where the kid will decide to use one language over others. And a lot of times that has to do with the social context of the kid. So if the friends speak a certain language, the kid may decide to speak that language because it has more social cachet for the kid. I mean, that's the language that is the friend's language, right? But it does not mean that they're not understanding grandma who speaks a language that may not be either the home language or the school language.
Yeah. So I just an anecdote. I remember. So one of my sisters is married to an English guy, and my nieces, they all live in Brussels, so they speak English, Spanish, and French. And when I talk to them, and I was maybe talking to the father, and I would speak English, and she would be like little one telling me, no, you in Spanish. She realized very, very clearly that English wasn't my language and that I should be speaking Spanish.
Yes,
But yeah, that's, go ahead, please.
when parents ask for advice and trying to to raise a kid bilingual, one of the things that are important are to keep the person that speaks a language constant. So if the father speaks Spanish, so the father always is speaking Spanish, the mom always is speaking Japanese, and the household could be a different one, a third one, but trying to keep it more or less consistent, because like you said, kids know what language you speak.
What about and a quick? I'm gonna ask you a question before we go for a quick break. But what about the accent? Is 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 the accent? Does the accent have anything to do with learning the language, or obviously, is there? Do we get lazy, and that's why we are not proficient at it?
That has to do with that critical period that I was talking about. So once we lose the capacity to produce sounds the same way as a native speaker would pronounce things, then we get what we call an accent. Everybody has an accent, right? Someone in Texas has an
No,
accent
I
which
don't.
is different from someone that has an accent from Boston in their own language, right? So when we
Yeah.
speak a second language, we also have an accent. That is the most difficult thing to acquire. That's the thing that needs to be acquired when you are the youngest. So when I was saying before that you could speak a language and learn a language at any age, that will be the one thing that
That you cannot.
you're never gonna sound like a native speaker. But that doesn't mean that your language is perfectly enough to have a conversation, to conduct business, to give a talk. That but yeah,
Yeah.
your accent will be what determines that you're not a native speaker.
And that's the beauty of it too, that we are all different and we bring who we are in how we speak. Okay, let's go for a quick break, and we'll be right back with my guest, Marta Gonzalez-Lloret. Welcome to Staying Young at Heart, and we continue our conversation with Marta Gonzalez-Lloret. Marta, we have a question from someone in the audience, and or in the audience, a viewer. I don't even know how to call our viewers these days. So they are asking if Duolingo is a good app to learn a language, but Duolingo or any other application these days.
Um, if the question is the most efficient way to learn the language, I would say it's probably not the most efficient way to learn a language, but it's definitely better than nothing at all. Number one. And number two, some of these apps are really good for certain things with the language. So the most efficient way of learning a language is going and living in the place where they speak that language and gain instruction on the language at the same time. So living only is not enough. you actually, if you're an adult, you have all of these resources in your brain already that you can use to speed that process, because we're not a kid anymore. So we have to use all those tools. If you cannot go and live in a place and also have instruction, well, there's other things that we can do. You can take classes. Instruction, we know it helps to learn a language. And some of these apps are also good, but and there's many of them. So Duolingo is a very common one, but there's lots of them. They have certain advantages. So you can learn vocabulary quite well. You can learn structure, so you can do a few sentences here and there. What they're not too well equipped for is conversational practices, because you are not really conversing with someone. Some of them actually offers you the possibility of connecting with someone remotely and then engage in conversation. So that would be much more effective, because in order to speak the language, what do we need to do? Speak, converse, right? It's like playing tennis. You can learn to play tennis by watching Wimbledon. You have to actually get in a court and play tennis. So languages are similar. So yes, these tools are good to start at least. And then when you get to a certain level, there's other things you need to do. You need to converse, you need to learn the pragmatics of the language and how that works. Many of these apps don't include that, but they're definitely a good way to start.
And Marta, you're so knowledgeable, and I don't know if I'm making justice by with my questions to you, but I think I'm pretty sure our viewers can just by listening to you realize how much you know. You wrote a book, Integrating Technology into Task-Based Language Teaching. Is that something that you explore in the book, like the technologies that you can use to learn the language?
Yes. Part of my research is looking at how technologies can help learning languages, and that can be individually or it can be through instruction also. So both ways. So yeah, that book explores apps, among other things, like games or telecollaborative activities, virtual environments, lots of different technologies that are out there and what their potential and their affordances for language learning are.
Is that something you practice at UH, Manoa?
Yes, definitely. I would be a good teacher if I could only write about it, but not practice it. So yes, well, right now we're forced to do everything via telecollaboration, via Zoom, sorry. So video conferences is the way we're doing our classes. But before that, and probably after these, I always include telecollaborative projects in my class. So my students always meet with the students somewhere else in the world to converse and use their language. There's lots of different technologies that we use to create videos, to create digital stories, to engage in anything that has to do with creating with the language, blogs.
So yeah, sorry, I was going to ask. So your students, are they mostly Spanish majors, or they are just taking Spanish, or?
We have everything at the university. Depends what class I'm teaching each semester. Right now, most of them are majors, but we have about 1,000 students that are just taking the language. So first and second year language students. And most of our teachers do integrate lots of technology in the classes. So it's something that is part of our methodology and how we understand that languages are learned.
And what are the exits, as we say in Spanish? What is the work that someone who is majoring in Spanish can expect? Is it mostly to be a professor?
With a major in Spanish, you can do lots of things. You can go in, of course, in the education field. So you can be a teacher of Spanish in anywhere in the world, or a teacher of English in a Spanish-speaking country. It's a very common one. You can do work on translation, on interpretation. You can go into, many of the majors are going to be nurses, doctors, and they want to be able to speak to their patients in the language of the patient. So they get the language also as an advantage. You can work in law enforcement. The FBI is always looking for people that are bilingual. There's lots of different jobs. It's not just teaching.
And in Hawaii, Spanish seems like a little, it's not as in the mainland, right? That everybody seems to be able to just like manage your life almost in Spanish. But here is more Japanese or Chinese. What attracted you to come to Hawaii? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Hawaii.
I finished my studies in Spain, and the program here, the second language studies program in UH, is one of the best in the world. So I figured out Hawaii doesn't look like a bad place to spend a few years and do a master's, a PhD. So I decided to come here to further my studies. And yeah, I actually was kind of following a boyfriend on the way here, but by the time I arrived here, he had left with a Korean woman and went to Korea. So I was a little late on that one.
That was probably a good thing, the way everything turned out for you. So how long ago was that?
That was 28 years ago.
Oh my goodness. So do you ever plan to go back to Spain, like to live in Spain, or Hawaii's home now?
No, Hawaii's home. Hawaii's home. I would be really hard to get the same type of work that I do here to do it in Spain. And my family is here too. So it's, oh, this is home. But
Yeah.
Spain will always be the fun place.
And the food place, there's always a lot of reasons to go back to Spain. Tell me a little bit about the future of languages. I hear some people saying languages will disappear and there will be two, or there will be Esperanto, right? Well, what can we expect in the future?
I don't think languages will disappear because, I mean, they have thousands of years on them and they have never disappeared, right? And actually, what will disappear is some small languages. So that's a pity, but languages that don't get spoken anymore, where the older people that speak them die and then they don't get carried anymore. Those are really sad stories of death of languages. They exist. Of course, there's always the hegemony of English, right? Everybody will speak English because it's the language of power, or Englishes as the language of power. Spanish is
Business.
growing. Yeah, the business. Yeah, exactly. Lots of business are conducted in what we call lingua franca. And the lingua franca of the world right now is English. But I don't think the other languages will disappear. I think languages are something inherently to human nature, and they will always be there. Now, how we learn them may change, that for sure.
So for you that you've written books, you've had a 28 very successful career, 28 years. You've written a lot of papers about cognitive behavior. And what is your professional goal? Where do you see, how do you see it progressing?
Um, I want to start working less and enjoy the beach more. Does that make sense?
That's definitely a personal mixing with professional right there.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
yeah. So Marta, we're running out of time, but I would like you to anything that you want to share with our audience, any words of encouragement, or you're definitely a motivation for many of us. So please take it away.
I would say if you have access to another language, speak it. One of our viewers was asking in the chat whether Pidgin would be considered a language. Yes, English Creole, Hawaiian English Creole is a language. So yes, use the languages, use the meet people. Language is meant to communicate and meet others. Only through language you're able to see other people's points of view. So it will open windows to worlds that you didn't even know existed, and to people that you had no access before. So if you have any chance to learn another language, do it. It will enrich your life.
Okay, well, Thank you, merci, mahalo, Marta. Thank you very much again for joining us and sharing your knowledge today. And we'll see you, everybody, in our next Staying Young at Heart. Please join us.